My name's Daniel. I'm 36. And until last year, I thought I'd finally found a little corner of peace in the world. I had saved up for years to buy my first home, a small two-story house at the edge of a quiet suburban block. The kind of place where you imagine morning coffee on the porch, kids riding their bikes, neighbors waving from across freshly mowed lawns. For the first 6 months, that's exactly what it was. Then they moved in. The Garcias, my new neighbors, arrived with a rented moving truck, a blaring Bluetooth speaker, and a sense of entitlement so large it might as well have come strapped to the roof with the mattresses. From the moment their car doors slammed shut, I felt a shift in the air. They weren't the friendly, "Need help with that box?" type of newcomers. They were loud, careless, and worst of all, they treated the block like their personal stage. At first, it was little things. Music past midnight. A car parked halfway across my driveway. Their trash bins spilling over into my yard. I told myself not to overreact. New neighbors need time to settle, right? I even introduced myself with a bottle of wine as a welcome gesture. Mr. Garcia smirked when I handed it to him and muttered, "Not really our taste," before setting it on the ground like I'd given him an old shoe. His wife laughed and said, "Guess we got the boring neighbor." I should have known then. The mocking started small, but grew fast. Every time I asked politely about the noise or the parking, they treated it like a comedy routine. Once, after their speakers rattled my windows at 1 a.m., I knocked on their door in my pajamas and asked if they could turn it down. Mr. Garcia opened the door, shirtless, grinning, and shouted back inside, "Hey, babe, Grandpa wants us to keep it down." I was 36, not 60, but they thought it was hilarious. Next day, when I went to get my mail, I heard their teenage son mutter, "Careful, don't wake Grandpa Dan," as his friend snickered. It didn't stop there. If I mowed my lawn on Saturday morning, Mrs. Garcia would yell from her porch, "Some people actually like to sleep in." If I asked about their dog using my yard as a bathroom, they'd laugh and say, "Hey, free fertilizer." The neighbors on the other side, an older couple, quietly sympathized with me, but admitted they didn't want to get involved. "The Garcias, they like attention," Mrs. Rogers whispered. The worst was the barbecue. They invited half the block for a welcome cookout. Everyone except me. That evening, as the smoke and laughter drifted into my open windows, I tried to ignore it. But then, sometime after 9 p.m., I heard Mr. Garcia's voice booming. "Hey, who thinks we should send Dan an invite? Oh, wait, never mind. He's probably in bed already." Laughter exploded. My name became the punchline. I sat at my desk that night, hands clenched, heart pounding. I wasn't confrontational by nature. I'd always believed in being the reasonable guy, the one who avoided drama. But reason only works with reasonable people. And the Garcias weren't reasonable. They were bullies in suburbia clothing. That's when the first spark of an idea hit me. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to let someone else do the talking. Someone with a badge, a clipboard, and the power to write things down in official reports. And once that thought landed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, I sat on my porch with black coffee and a tight jaw, staring at the Garcias yard like it owed me an apology. Beer cans glittered in the grass. Their dog, an anxious, untrained blur of fur, paced the fence line, yanking at a frayed leash tied to a patio chair. Someone had left a plate of ribs on the hood of their car. Flies had declared independence. I don't shout. I research. By 8:12 a.m., I had the city website open, clicking through tabs like a librarian on a mission from God. Solid waste. Noise abatement. Animal control. Parking enforcement. Zoning and code compliance. Fire prevention. Each page had something useful. Not because I was looking for revenge, but because the rules already existed. The Garcias had been stepping on everyone. The city just hadn't been invited to the party yet. I started a log, dates, times, photos. I called it my neighbor notes, but the file name on my desktop was simpler enough. 9:03 a.m. First call, solid waste. I learned there's a rule about leaving bins out days before or after pickup and about overflow that attracts pests. The woman on the line sounded tired and efficient, like she'd heard every excuse. "You can remain anonymous," she said. "We just need the address and what you're seeing." What I'm seeing, I looked back at the curb. Two bins tilted like passed-out frat boys, lids gaping, a black bag split open on the sidewalk. A buffet for raccoons. She chuckled. "We'll send someone by." At noon, a white city truck stopped in front of the Garcia's house. A man in an orange vest stepped out with a clipboard and a stack of neon stickers, the kind of warning labels you can spot from outer space. He knelt, snapped photos, wrote notes, and slapped an orange square on the bin. 72 hours to correct sanitation code. I stayed on my porch, unread book open on my knee, pretending to be absorbed while my heart drummed like a hummingbird. Mrs. Garcia stepped out in an oversized t-shirt, squinting at the sticker. "What is this?" she yelled toward the house. Mr. Garcia emerged, sunglasses on despite the clouds. He skimmed the sticker, then looked up and did a slow theatrical turn toward the block. "Somebody's got too much free time," he announced. "Probably Grandpa." I took a long sip of coffee. Didn't blink. Didn't move. The older couple next door, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, watched from their living room window. She met my eyes for a second and gave the tiniest nod. Not approval, not complicity, just keep going. That night, the Garcias pushed the music louder than usual, the bass thudding through my walls like a second heartbeat. I checked the time, 11:18 p.m., and watched my ceiling fan vibrate to a rhythm I hadn't asked for. I opened my window, placed my phone on the sill, and recorded 1 minute of sound. It wasn't official decibel testing, but it was documentation. Then I called the non-emergency line and calmly explained the pattern. At 11:41 p.m., a cruiser rolled up, lights off, quiet as a cat. Two officers walked to the Garcia store. The music cut mid-lyric. There was conversation, a shrug from Mr. Garcia, laughter from somewhere in the kitchen. One officer gestured to the houses, the neighbors. A warning. The officers left. The volume dipped barely. 10 minutes later, it crept up like a guilty conscience. I logged everything. Times. Volume. A clip of Mr. Garcia's "Just One More Song" routine caught on my phone as I watered the hydrangeas at midnight like an insomniac gardener. The next morning, I filled out the city's online complaint for recurring noise/nuisance and hit submit. It wasn't a scream. It was a lever. Call 3 wasn't planned. It happened because of a pile of lumber. Saturday, 9:27 a.m., a pickup truck backed into the Garcia's driveway, stacked high with pressure-treated boards and shiny new joist hangers. A couple of guys in painter's pants hopped out, dropped gear, and started measuring along the back fence. I watched one of them gesture, a rectangle shape as big as a small stage. A deck. I pulled up the city's permit portal. New decks require a permit. Inspections for footings. Setback rules from the property line. I clicked the sample PDFs until I found the line I wanted. Any new structure exceeding 200 square feet or attached to the primary dwelling requires a building permit and inspection sequence. I drifted casually to my side yard to water the basil that didn't need watering. One of the workers squinted over the fence at me. I raised my mug in a half wave. He nodded back, then turned to Mr. Garcia, who strode out like a foreman at a fashion show. "Permit?" the worker asked. Mr. Garcia smirked. "We're just repairing an old one." "No need." There was no old one. My camera shutter sounded like a polite cough. Photo of the lumber. Photo of the framing squares. Photo of the string line taut from fence to house. Photo of the workers laughing. I submitted report number 2. Unpermitted deck construction with attachments, and typed, "Workers on site." Active framing planned. 25-foot x 16 feet estimate. Before I hit send, I hesitated. Was this petty? Then I saw their dog again, now off the leash, sprinting across my grass to relieve itself while the teen watched from the porch and shouted, "Nice lawn, Grandpa." I sent the report and called animal control. The officer who came on Monday wore calm-like armor. She knocked. The Garcia's teen answered. There was a conversation at the edge of my hearing. Licensed? Vaccinated? Leash in public spaces? Followed by the soft rip of another bright sticker. Notice of compliance required. Animal control. That afternoon, Mr. Garcia stood in his driveway and declared loudly to no one and everyone, "Wow, this block sure got official all of a sudden." He scanned the street like he was looking for my confession taped to a mailbox. I trimmed my rose bushes and hummed an aimless tune. He stared. I didn't oblige. Tuesday, a code compliance SUV idled at the curb. A woman in a navy polo stepped out, introduced herself to the Rogers, then crossed to the Garcia's yard. She looked like she'd seen every flavor of stubborn. Mr. Garcia met her near the side gate, arms folded. "We're just putting up a platform," he said, too casual. "Platforms with railings are decks," she replied, gesturing to the hardware. "Decks require permits. You need to stop work until you have one." "Who complained?" he asked. She smiled a practiced, impenetrable smile. "We respond to reports. That's all." He laughed, brittle. "Let me guess, Grandpa Dan." She didn't turn her head, but somehow her eyes flicked toward me, then back. "Sir, failure to comply can result in fines." "What if I just finish it today?" he said, bluffing. "You won't," she said simply, and handed him a white door hanger that read "Stop work. Permit required." For the first time, I saw it, the crack behind his smirk, a narrow sliver of uncertainty, the realization that rules weren't just for other people. He called someone. He paced. He rubbed the back of his neck and kicked a bit of gravel like a boy who'd been told to put the slingshot away. The workers left. The lumber sat like a promise on pause. That night was quiet. Not peace, quiet. The kind of silence that feels like a breath held too long. Wednesday morning, they retaliated in the pettiest way. Their teen parked his dented sedan so close to my driveway apron that I had to perform a 47-point turn to escape. I took a photo, tire across the faded curb paint, and sent report number 4, obstructed driveway / parking violation, to parking enforcement. It was almost too easy now. Address, photo, submit. A chalkstick-wielding officer left a ticket before lunch. Around 4 p.m., the Garcias rolled out a spaghetti of orange extension cords across damp grass, daisy-chained from an ancient outlet to a table of speakers under a sagging canopy. The cords ran through a puddle. One plug was wrapped in duct tape like a bandage. A box of fireworks sat nearby, open, wicks exposed to the breeze. My stomach tightened. I could hear the echo of their laughter from the barbecue, how they'd used my name as a punchline. But this wasn't about my pride anymore. This was about not watching a preventable headline happen across my property line. I lifted my phone and snapped another photo. The cords, the puddle, the speakers, the fireworks. Then I searched the number I'd bookmarked that morning while scrolling the city site. Fire prevention, non-emergency hazards. I hovered over the call button for one long beat, the sky darkening like a warning. The first raindrops ticked the canopy. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. I didn't need to yell. I whispered to myself, thumb lowering to the screen. I just needed someone with a clipboard. I pressed call. The line rang once, twice. Fire prevention. A woman answered, brisk and calm. What's the situation? I looked up at the tangle of cords glistening in the rain and the box of fireworks nudged by the wind. Across the fence, Mr. Garcia glanced at the sky, then at the speakers, as if deciding which he could outshout. I took a breath. I think you'll want to see this. The fire inspector showed up faster than I expected. A gray sedan with the city seal pulled to the curb just as the Garcias were dragging their grill under the canopy. The woman who stepped out wore a navy jacket, hair tied back tight, clipboard tucked beneath one arm. She scanned the scene once, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "Afternoon," she called, stepping onto their lawn. "I'm here about a report of unsafe wiring." Mr. Garcia swaggered toward her, flashing the same grin he used on anyone he wanted to dismiss. "It's just a few cords, nothing dangerous. We know what we're doing." The inspector knelt, tapped one cord with her pen, then pointed to the fireworks box. Extension cords in standing water, overloaded outlets, improper grounding, and fireworks stored less than 10 feet from an ignition source. She lifted her eyes to him, voice flat as a hammer. "No, sir, you don't know what you're doing." Mrs. Garcia muttered something sharp in Spanish and stormed inside. The teen rolled his eyes, retreating to the porch with crossed arms. Mr. Garcia tried laughing it off, but it sounded thin. The inspector wasn't laughing. She pulled out a neon red placard and stuck it to their front post. "Imminent hazard. Cease use immediately." Failure to comply could mean fines up to $2,500, she said, already snapping photos. "If I come back and see these cords again, we escalate." I stayed perfectly still behind my hedge, phone in hand. The moment the inspector's car pulled away, Mr. Garcia spun in a slow circle, scanning the neighborhood like a hawk searching for prey. His eyes lingered on my porch. I flipped a page in my book without looking up. That night, instead of blasting music, they gathered in tight whispers. For the first time in months, my windows didn't shake. I fell asleep to crickets, not bass. But quiet never lasts. By Friday, the Garcias had shifted tactics. Their team decided the sidewalk in front of my house was his new basketball court. Dribbling at dawn, thud after thud rattling against the pavement. When I stepped outside, he smirked. "Just exercising, Grandpa. That okay with you?" The ball bounced off my mailbox. I picked it up, turning it in my hands. For a split second, I considered puncturing it with my rose shears. Instead, I smiled, dropped it back, and said, "Don't let it roll into the street." He frowned, like he'd been denied the argument he wanted. That afternoon, I noticed their front lawn again. Knee-high weeds, trash bags sagging in the sun, 2 broken chairs tipped sideways. It wasn't just sloppy. It was a violation. Property maintenance code. Report number 5. 2 days later, a code compliance officer arrived with a tape measure and camera. He cataloged the weeds, the debris, the sagging gutter pulling free from their roofline. Another bright sticker bloomed on their door. Mr. Garcia tore it down and shredded it in the driveway, shouting, "Cowards! At least say it to my face." The Rogers curtains twitched. Someone across the street watered plants that didn't need water. I stayed inside, kettle whistling, calm as a monk. By then, it wasn't just me keeping track. The Garcias mess had been bothering everyone. Cars blocking hydrants, cigarette butts tossed in other yards, late-night fireworks in July. My reports had opened a door, and neighbors were quietly stepping through. Monday morning, I spotted a new notice fluttering on their mailbox. Pest control advisory, possible infestation. That one wasn't mine. For the first time, I realized I'd started something bigger. The Garcias weren't fighting me anymore. They were fighting the whole block. And the block had clipboards on its side. The dominoes started falling quicker than I ever imagined. By Wednesday, 2 different city vehicles pulled up within hours of each other. The first was animal control again, this time with a second officer. I peeked through the blinds as they spoke to Mrs. Garcia, who was holding their dog by the collar while it barked and twisted like a maniac. From what I overheard, the dog wasn't up to date on shots, and the leash law violations had been flagged for repeat offenses. She tried to argue, voice sharp and trembling, but the officer handed her a yellow slip and calmly said, "Failure to comply may result in removal." The dog barked louder. She slammed the door. The second visit that day came from zoning enforcement. A tall man with a sunburn and a neon vest strode into the backyard with his clipboard like he owned the place. From my porch, I caught bits of the exchange. Setbacks, easements, drainage violations. Mr. Garcia followed him around, arms flailing, insisting it was temporary. The inspector didn't even argue, just pointed, wrote, and photographed until the air itself felt stamped with disapproval. By evening, 3 more fluorescent notices fluttered on their porch like sickly flags. The Garcias were unraveling. That night, I was taking trash out when I heard raised voices through the hedge. Mr. Garcia was pacing on his porch, phone pressed to his ear. "No, man, I don't know who it is, but somebody's got it out for us. City this, city that. Every damn day, someone's showing up. You think I've got time for 17 different inspectors breathing down my neck?" 17. I froze. He'd said the number like a curse, like he could already see it coming. Mrs. Garcia snapped back. "Maybe if you didn't act like a fool all the time, people wouldn't complain." Their teen muttered something I couldn't catch, followed by a slammed door. I carried my trash can inside, slow and quiet, heart pounding. They were starting to crack, blaming each other. The next day brought the fire marshal himself. Not just a junior inspector this time, the marshal. His white SUV gleamed under the sun, gold badge on the door. He walked the perimeter with 2 deputies, pointing out the scorched marks on the grass where fireworks had clearly gone off. He knocked on their door, waited, then posted a thick packet with citations and next steps printed in bold. When Mr. Garcia finally stumbled outside to read it, he crumpled the paper in both fists and hurled it at the lawn. Then he shouted, loud enough for the whole block to hear, "Whoever's doing this, you won't win." His voice cracked on the last word. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was desperation. I almost smiled. Almost. But part of me just sat there stunned, because what had started as one quiet call about trash bins had snowballed into something bigger than I'd pictured. The Garcias weren't untouchable anymore, and every knock on their door reminded them of it. Friday evening, just as the sun was sinking low and turning the street gold, I heard the crunch of heavy footsteps across my lawn. By the time I opened the door, Mr. Garcia was already standing there, fists jammed on his hips, chest puffed like he was about to wrestle the air. "You think you're clever, huh?" he barked. His sunglasses were pushed up on his head, leaving his eyes wild and bloodshot. "All these inspectors showing up day after day. You think I don't know it's you?" I leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I don't know what you're talking about." He laughed, too loud, too brittle. "Don't play dumb. You've been out there taking pictures, lurking around. Who else has this much time on their hands? I tilted my head. Maybe the city's just finally paying attention. That landed like a slap. His face tightened. Listen, Grandpa, I don't care how many complaints you file. You're not running us off. We're not going anywhere. For a moment, I let the silence stretch between us. He expected me to argue, to shout back, to give him fuel. Instead, I just smiled faintly and said, "Good. Then you'll be here to get the rest of the visits." His jaw dropped slightly before he caught himself. He muttered a curse, jabbed a finger in my direction, then stormed off across the grass. His teen, who'd been watching from the driveway, called after him, "What did the old man say?" Mr. Garcia didn't answer, just yanked open his car door and slammed it shut so hard the alarm chirped. That night, the Garcias tried a different tactic. Instead of blasting music, they started taunting. Every time I stepped outside, one of them would shout something over the fence. "Careful, Grandpa. Don't trip over your walker. Hey, can I borrow your hearing aid to call the city again? Smile, you're on camera. Oh, wait, you were the camera." Their laughter rolled out like smoke, but it was thin, desperate. They weren't mocking me anymore. They were mocking the only defense they had left. The neighborhood was shifting too. Where once people avoided eye contact, now they gave me small nods, quiet smiles. Mrs. Rogers from next door whispered as we both checked our mail, "They're losing their grip. Keep doing what you're doing." Saturday morning, another inspection rolled in, this time from Environmental Services. Their backyard had become a swamp of junk, old tires stacked against the fence, oil-stained tools scattered near the shed. The inspector snapped photos, measured runoff, and left behind another neon notice. By noon, Mr. Garcia ripped every single sticker off his door and windows, shredded them into confetti, and tossed the pieces into the street. "We don't care. None of this means anything," he shouted. But the sight of him, sweating, furious, standing knee-deep in his own shredded warnings, told a different story. The Garcias were cornered, and the block knew it. The Garcias didn't take humiliation quietly. By Sunday night, they decided to fight back the only way they knew how: chaos. At 11 p.m., the bass kicked in, shaking my windows like an earthquake. Fireworks cracked overhead, raining sparks dangerously close to roofs. Their dog barked nonstop, tied to a flimsy chair that scraped against the concrete as it struggled. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea, the logbook open in front of me. My pen moved steadily. 11:03 p.m., fireworks. 11:15, bass audible indoors. 11:22, dog barking without break for 15+ minutes. It wasn't anger anymore. It was procedure. At 11:40, I called the non-emergency line again. Calm voice. Exact times. Clear description. I attached the audio recording from my window. 20 minutes later, 2 squad cars arrived, lights flashing red and blue across the block. The music cut instantly. Doors slammed. Voices rose. From the shadows of my porch, I saw Mr. Garcia trying to joke with the officers, clapping one on the back. The officer stepped back, stone-faced, and handed him a citation. Not a warning. A fine. Mrs. Garcia screamed, "This is harassment," loud enough for the whole street to hear. But the only answer was the click of the officer's pen and the shuffle of paperwork. The next morning, the Garcias went door to door. I watched from my blinds as they knocked on neighbors' homes, gesturing wildly, voices raised. At the Rogers, Mrs. Garcia waved her arms as if pleading for solidarity. The Rogers just shook their heads and closed the door. At the house across the street, a younger couple barely cracked their door before saying something sharp and shutting it in their faces. No one wanted to side with them anymore. By Tuesday, their frustration turned inward. I heard shouting late at night, walls thudding as if furniture was being thrown. Their teens stomped down the porch steps the next day, backpack slung over one shoulder, muttering, "I hate this house," before slamming the car door and peeling out. That evening, I noticed something new. Two city utility trucks parked by their curb. One man in a hard hat walked the length of the property with a meter reader, frowning. Another inspected the sagging wires drooping toward the roofline. I hadn't filed that one. Someone else had. The Garcias weren't just on my radar anymore. They were on everyone's. When the notices multiplied, environmental hazards, noise citations, property maintenance orders, they stopped tearing them down. Instead, the papers just clung to their door like layers of bandages on a wound that wouldn't heal. One night, as I water my roses, Mr. Garcia finally snapped. He stormed to the edge of his yard, fists balled. "You won't win, old man," he yelled across the hedge. 17 inspectors, 27. "I don't care. We'll outlast you." His voice cracked at the end, less threat than plea. I set down the watering can, met his furious stare, and said calmly, "Then I guess you'd better get used to company at your door." His face twisted. He spun on his heel, muttering curses, and slammed his door so hard the porch light rattled. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not smugness. Just quiet satisfaction. Because the truth was sinking in for him. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was the whole city's. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. The Garcias had been unusually quiet for 2 days, and for a moment I wondered if they were finally learning. Then I heard it, the roar of power tools. From my upstairs window, I saw them hauling lumber into the backyard again. No contractors this time. Just Mr. Garcia, shirtless, sweating, hacking a board with a circular saw like a man possessed. They were rebuilding the deck, ignoring the stop work order. I pulled out my phone and took photos, the saw, the frame, the piles that would stack like a fortress. 10 minutes later, I submitted a follow-up to code enforcement. By 3 p.m., a white truck with bold black letters, Inspections Division, rolled up. This time, it wasn't just one clipboard. 2 inspectors stepped out, followed by a man in a suit with a badge clipped to his belt. They went straight into the backyard. I watched from my upstairs window as Mr. Garcia argued, pacing, waving his arms. One inspector pointed at the bright red stop work notice still dangling from the gate. The suited man said something, calm but sharp, and scribbled on a form. Mr. Garcia's face drained of color. The Rogers told me later what I couldn't hear. It wasn't just another warning. It was a summons. That evening, the Garcia's teen came stomping out to the driveway. Phone pressed to his ear, voice breaking. "No, Dad's freaking out. They said we have to go to court." "Yeah, like actual court. Over a stupid deck." He kicked the basketball so hard it ricocheted off their car and skidded into the street. The next day, another vehicle showed up, this one with the county seal. Health Department. 2 inspectors in gloves and masks poked around their overflowing trash bins in the backyard where food waste had been left to rot. When they left, they slapped a new notice on the door. Health hazard, correct immediately. Mrs. Garcia ripped it down, crumpled it in her hands, and hurled it into the street. Her voice shook as she screamed, "We're being targeted. This is harassment." But the words rang hollow, because no one came to defend them. Not the neighbors, not the block, not even their own son, who had started disappearing for hours, coming home late and sullen. That night, Mr. Garcia tried to throw a party. Music, laughter, the smell of beer drifting across the yards. But only 2 cars showed up, friends who stayed less than an hour. By 10 p.m., the Garcias were sitting alone in their driveway, bottles clinking against the pavement, the music low and defeated. At midnight, I looked out the window and saw Mr. Garcia sitting on the curb, head in his hands, surrounded by scraps of paper, the shredded remains of all the notices he'd torn down. Mrs. Garcia stood over him, arms crossed, saying nothing. And for the first time since they moved in, the house next door didn't look like a fortress of noise and arrogance. It looked like it was crumbling. The morning of their court date, the entire block felt different. No music, no barking dog, no thuds of basketballs against mailboxes. Just silence. Their SUV was parked crooked in the driveway, the hood propped open as if they'd been arguing about whether it would even start. At 8:15, they finally emerged. Mr. Garcia in a wrinkled button-up, Mrs. Garcia in a blazer 2 sizes too tight, both of them looking like kids dragged to the principal's office. Their teen lagged behind, hoodie up, earbuds jammed in, refusing to look at either of them. I pretended to be trimming roses as they shuffled past, though inside I was burning every detail into memory. The swagger was gone. Mr. Garcia's shoulders sagged, his hands fidgeting. Mrs. Garcia's mouth was a hard line. They didn't notice the neighbors watching. Curtains twitched, blinds shifted. The Rogers stood openly on their porch, coffee mugs in hand, tracking every step to the SUV. When the car finally coughed to life and pulled away, the silence it left behind felt like the exhale of the whole block. That evening, when they came back, the difference was even sharper. They didn't slam doors or blast music. They didn't yell across the yard. They just shuffled into the house, heads down, and let the screen door slap shut. The Rogers told me later what happened in court. The judge had been blunt. Multiple code violations, failure to comply with orders, pending fines. They'd been given 30 days to fix the mess or face escalating penalties, including potential liens. Mr. Garcia had tried to argue, even laugh it off. But the judge cut him down in seconds. "Sir, this isn't a joke. This is your last warning." For the next week, the Garcia scrambled. Contractors came and went, half finishing repairs before storming off. The deck was dismantled plank by plank, left in a heap by the fence. The trash disappeared, replaced by brand new bins. Their dog, finally, was walked on a leash, a shiny new tag dangling from its collar. But the inspectors didn't stop. Now that the house was flagged, they kept coming, checking, circling back. And every time a white truck or city sedan pulled up, I saw the Garcia's blind snap shut. Their war with me had turned into a siege from every angle. And yet, in spite of everything, Mr. Garcia couldn't resist one last act of defiance. One evening, as I stepped out to bring in the mail, he stood on his porch, arms folded, smirk pasted back on like a mask. "You think you've won, old man," he called across the hedge. "But we're still here. We're not going anywhere." I held his stare for a long, quiet moment. Then I slipped the mail under my arm and said, "You're right. You're still here. But so are the inspectors." His smirk cracked just a little. He turned and went inside without another word. For the first time since they'd moved in, I didn't feel like the small, quiet neighbor being mocked. I felt like the one holding the line. By midsummer, the Garcias weren't fighting me anymore. They were fighting numbers, not the kind that could be mocked or shrugged off. Real numbers. Fines stacked like bricks. $250 for trash violations. $400 for animal control. $750 for unpermitted construction. $1,200 for repeated noise complaints. And the court fees, the mandatory inspections, the administrative costs that multiplied every week. It was no longer a neighborhood squabble. It was math, and math always wins. The first cracks showed in their driveway. Their shiny SUV vanished one day, replaced by an older sedan with a mismatched door. Mrs. Rogers whispered that she'd overheard Mrs. Garcia at the grocery store, muttering in her phone about falling behind on payments. Soon after, contractors stopped showing up altogether. The half-repaired deck sat like a skeleton in the yard. Their gutters dangled loose, one corner broken clean off. A tarp flapped across part of the roof, where shingles had been ripped away in a storm, but never replaced. The house itself was turning into a billboard of defeat. Neighbors began whispering openly now. "Did you hear? They owe over $5,000 already." I saw the lien notice taped to their door. "They'll never dig out of this." The Garcias had once been the loudest voices on the block. Now they were the subject of every hushed conversation. Inside their house, the tension spilled out into the street. Doors slammed. Arguments erupted so loudly they drowned out the cicadas at night. Their teen spent less and less time at home, sometimes gone for whole weekends, sometimes returning only to scream at his parents before storming out again. And still, the inspections kept coming. Pest control, property upkeep, utilities, fire safety rechecks. Each visit ended with new papers slapped to the door, each paper a reminder that their empire of arrogance was crumbling. One evening, as I sat on my porch with a book, Mrs. Garcia stepped outside. She wasn't dressed up, no makeup, no armor, just a tired woman in worn-out slippers, holding a stack of unopened envelopes. She stared at them for a long time, then dropped onto the steps and buried her face in her hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the nights they mocked me from that very porch, their laughter echoing through the block, my name their favorite punchline. No, this wasn't cruelty. This was consequence. And consequence was finally at their door, wearing 17 different badges. By August, a for sale sign sprouted in their yard, slanted, almost embarrassed, as if even the sign knew it was a surrender. The block exhaled. Conversations grew lighter. Kids played outside again. The Rogers smiled more. And every time I saw that sign, I felt the weight of months of mockery slide off my shoulders. Because the Garcias weren't untouchable anymore. They were leaving. The for sale sign didn't last long. Within 3 weeks, a moving truck rumbled into the driveway, the same way it had on their first day. But this time there was no blaring speaker, no laughing crowd, no swagger. Just boxes hastily taped, stacked crooked, shoved inside like the house itself was eager to spit them out. I stood at my window as they worked. Mr. Garcia moved slower now, shoulders bent under the weight of furniture and fines alike. Mrs. Garcia barked orders in clipped tones, but her voice carried no confidence, only exhaustion. Their teen didn't help at all. He sat sulking on the curb, scrolling his phone, muttering that he couldn't wait to be done with this stupid place. When the last chair scraped into the truck, Mr. Garcia paused on the porch. He looked around the street, at the neighbors watching from behind their curtains, at the Rogers standing openly with folded arms, and me on my porch with a book in hand. For the first time in months, he didn't smirk. He didn't insult. He didn't say a word. He just got in the truck, slammed the door, and drove away. The block was silent for a beat, then the Rogers clapped. A sharp, satisfied sound that broke the tension like glass. Others joined in, laughter spilling out, not cruel but relieved. We weren't mocking. We were reclaiming. That night, the street was the quietest it had ever been. No bass, No barking, no shouting. Just the chirp of crickets and the rustle of leaves. I slept with my window open for the first time in months, the breeze cool and clean. As I drifted off, I thought about how it all began, with one orange sticker on a trash bin, one small reminder that rules exist for everyone. I hadn't yelled, hadn't fought, hadn't sunk to their level. I just kept calling, kept recording, kept trusting that order could outlast chaos. 17 inspectors, 17 badges, 17 reminders that arrogance has limits. The Garcias had mocked me, dismissed me, tried to make me the joke of the block. But in the end, they weren't laughing. And for the first time, I realized the sweetest sound in the world isn't revenge. It's peace.